Today we are starting a brand new series. It's been a while since we've been in a new series. Today we're starting one, and it's going to be interesting. Check this out. Our communications director put that together this morning, and I said, it kind of feels like a horror film. And he said, exactly. And I said, okay, we'll see how this goes. Anyway, that's our new series. It's called The Deadly Seven. And right up front, let me tell you what this series will be and what it won't be. We are not going to spend 7 weeks making you feel terrible about yourself. We are not doing 7 weeks of be a better person and try harder. That is not the goal. Instead, we are spending 7 weeks looking at what's chasing us, what's pursuing us, what wants to have and corrupt our souls. Here's the concept. There's a long, wise, deeply pastoral tradition in the church called the 7 deadly sins. You've probably heard the phrase. Maybe you saw the 1995 movie with Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman. What's in the box? You remember that ending? No, you don't at all. That's okay. Maybe worth a rewatch. But here's the thing about the 7 sins, and most people miss this. They were never meant to be a list of the most dramatic, most villainous, most newsworthy bad behaviors. They were designed as a way of diagnosing what is quietly going on inside the heart of the average Sunday morning attender. So thank you. That's what I was going for. Yes. So for the next 7 weeks, we're going to walk through pride, greed, lust, sloth, gluttony, wrath, and envy. And we'll be looking at them through the lens of our specific zip codes. Because these 7 sins don't show up in Cedar Mill or Hillsboro or Bethany or Beaverton the way they showed up in medieval textbooks. In fact, often they show up in our suburbs looking like wisdom, like planning, like self-care, like they hide themselves as a responsible, curated life. And friends, that's exactly what makes them deadly. See, here's the driving reality I want us to consider every single week in this series. It's not that I might have this sin, but that this sin might have me. In Genesis chapter 4, right at the beginning of the Bible, there's a story of 2 brothers, Cain and Abel. And Cain struggles in that story with sin, specifically the sins of greed and envy. And God comes to Cain and he says, hey, Cain, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it. That's this series in a nutshell. Sin wants to have us, but we are going to expose it and name it and ask Jesus to set us free from it, because this series isn't just about being better, it's about being free. Now, before we get to week 1's actual topic, pride, I want to get clear on a couple of terms. Here's the first one: sin. What do we mean by sin? Consider this for a second. When I say the word sin, what comes up for you? What comes to mind with that word? For most of us, sin is basically a synonym for bad things we shouldn't do. Rules we've broken, lines we've crossed. It's religious behavior management. And I want to say that understanding isn't wrong, it's just shallow. It hits the surface, but it misses the depth. Because listen to what Jesus says about sin. This is Mark chapter 7, his words. Again, Jesus called the crowd to him and said, listen to me, everyone, and understand this. Nothing outside a person can defile them by going into them. Rather, it is what comes out of a person that defiles them. And then right after this, Jesus' disciples pull him aside and they say, "What did you mean by that, Jesus?" And then Jesus explains. Actually, before he explains, he says, "Are you so dull?" That's actually in the Bible. Jesus, "Are you so dull? Why are you not keeping up with me?" I like how Jesus sort of keeps it 100. Anyway, here's his explanation. What comes out of a person is what defiles them. For it is from within, out of a person's heart, that evil thoughts come: sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, greed, malice, deceit, lewdness, envy, slander, arrogance, and folly. All these evils come from inside and defile a person. Here's what Jesus is doing. He's pulling sin off of the surface of behavior and locating it in the heart. He's saying sin isn't primarily what you do, it's who you've become. It's located in you, in your deepest desires and loves and loyalties and values. So the sin you do on the outside flows out of the sin that you've embraced on the inside. This is exactly what the 7 deadly sins are all about. They are not just a list of prohibited behaviors. They are a disorder of our loves. They're when we love the wrong things or love the right things in the wrong order or proportion. That's when sinful behavior emerges. The heart is the source. This is not just a series about behavior. It is, but first it's a series of our hearts. And just to be clear, the 7 deadly sins are not, because we're a Bible church, a list from a specific verse in the Bible. They are drawn out of the Bible with deep biblical wisdom, and they have a pretty remarkable history. I'll give it to you in short. In the 4th century, a desert monk named Evagrius Ponticus cataloged 8 destructive thoughts that derailed the pursuit of God. Then in 590 AD, Pope Gregory the Great condensed that list to 7. Then Thomas Aquinas systematized it. C.S. Lewis wrote about it. Dorothy Sayers preached on it. And here we are in Portland, 2026, still talking about this list. Why? Not because they're the worst sins, but because they are the root sins. These are the sins that grow, the ones that compound, the ones that spread quietly until they destroy, and not just you, but the people around you and all of society. These 7 sins are like cancer. And one more thing to note before we get to pride. Each week pairs a sin with its corresponding virtues. So let's talk about virtues for a second, because I don't want us to think of virtues as just better rules to follow. No. Yes, we can work at virtues, but they are often not the result of us trying harder. You see, we don't live virtuously by our own effort, but instead by walking with the Spirit. And when we walk in the Spirit and sin loses its grip, virtues are what God grows in its place. This is again why the core statement of our series is not be better, it's be free. The opposite of sin isn't morality, it's Jesus-fueled identity. More on that over the next 7 weeks. Let's get started. I've paused long enough. All of that was just intro. It's a sad day. Okay, here we go. I want to start into pride with this question. Is pride your biggest problem? Think about that. Is pride your biggest problem? Now, a fair number of you probably said no, because pride just doesn't feel like your issue. Pride is the person who incessantly talks about themselves or posts about themselves, or the pastor who preaches about his high school sports accolades. Not that funny. You see, it's easy to compare ourselves to the most arrogant people we know and then say, that's not me. And that instinct, that not me instinct is precisely what I want us to sit with, because pride in the suburbs may actually look less like arrogance and more like self-sufficiency. Like a person who's self-motivated self-made, self-built, self-sustained. Friends, we are a community of smart, capable, educated, hardworking, successful people. And that is not a bad thing. But here's the trap. In our zip codes, pride sneaks in through the side door. We don't feel proud. We just feel responsible. We feel competent. We feel like people who have our lives together, who are mature, who are moral, who dress and drive and look responsible, unlike those crazy people downtown. You see, pride is often invisible because it wears the face of virtue where we live. So let's talk quickly about where this whole thing started. Isaiah chapter 14. In this chapter, the prophet is speaking in cosmic poetic language about the fall of a figure at the height of power and prestige. Some scholars think that this figure was a great earthly king. Some think it may have even been Satan himself. But either way, Isaiah tells us in verses 13 and 14 what is happening in this figure's heart. Listen. You said in your heart, I will ascend to the heavens. I will raise my throne above the stars of God. I will sit enthroned on the mount of assembly, on the utmost heights of Mount Zaphon. Zaphon was, by the way, the mythological mountain where the gods ruled. I will ascend above the tops of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. Now, lots to say about these verses, but here's what we must see. 5 times in this chapter is the phrase, I will. I will, I will, I will, I will, I will. This is pride in its most distilled form. Not arrogance, not bragging, not showing off, not being obnoxious at parties, just a slow, steady staircase of self-exaltation. It's just the quiet, persistent installation of self where only God belongs. I'll say that again. It's the quiet, persistent installation of self where only God belongs. And listen to the next verse. But you are brought down to the realm of the dead, to the depths of the pit. You are brought down. Friends, pride always feels like it is taking us up, but in the end, it will certainly take us down. Let's turn for a minute to one of the most unusual stories in the Bible. These are always fun, aren't they? Daniel chapter 4. It's the story of King Nebuchadnezzar. He was the king of Babylon at the height of its powers. He built the Hanging Gardens, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. There's sort of a recreated picture of what it may have looked like. This king conquered Jerusalem amongst other cities and nations. And under his reign, Babylon expanded into the most powerful empire on the entire planet. So, just to clarify the picture, by any measure of success in our culture, achievement, wealth, power, legacy, influence, this man was at the tippy top. And Daniel 4 opens with this king's own words. Here's what he says. I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at home in my palace, contented and prosperous. But then he continues, and the king has a dream, a nightmare really, and in this dream, he sees an enormous tree, a tree that reaches all the way to the skies. It has beautiful leaves and abundant fruit, and the whole earth can see it. And then a heavenly messenger comes and appears and commands, cut it down. Leave only the stump, and let the one it represents lose his mind. Let him live like a wild animal, the angel says, so that the living may know that the Most High is sovereign over all kingdoms on earth. This is the dream. This is the king's nightmare, and it freaks him out. And so he calls his most trusted advisor, that's a guy named Daniel, and Daniel listens. He hears the dream from the king, and after the king says, Keep it real with me, Daniel. Tell me the whole truth. Tell me what this dream means. Daniel does. He says, okay, king, you better renounce your sins. You better acknowledge God. You better humble yourself now. You've got 12 months to lay down your pride and put God on the throne. But does the king do this? Do kings tend to give up their power? What's your experience in the world? Not often, and not here. And so 12 months later, King Nebuchadnezzar is actually walking on the roof of his palace again, looking out over Babylon, over his giant kingdom, and he actually says out loud to himself, is not this the great Babylon I have built as the royal residence by my mighty power and for the glory of my majesty? Friends, this is just the 5 I wills of Isaiah with a Babylonian accent. And the words are barely out of his mouth when a voice comes from heaven. Your royal authority has been taken from you. And immediately what had been said about Nebuchadnezzar was fulfilled. He was driven away from people and ate grass like an ox. His body was drenched with the dew of heaven until his hair grew like the feathers of an eagle and his nails like the claws of a bird. The most powerful man on earth was living now like an animal in a field, like a wild animal. Now, I have to say, this is not just some strange Old Testament story. It's here to teach us something profound. Pride isn't just bad for you. It does something to you. It makes you less human. By trying to be more than human, Nebuchadnezzar became less than human. He became more like an animal. You see, here's the truth, friends. To be human, to be image bearers of God, people created in his image, is to be compassionate. To be human is to be compassionate, but pride robs you of empathy. Pride accentuates ego and survival instincts. Pride drives you towards me and what I want now instead of the others-focused together life that actually leads to joy. Pride makes you less human, and it steals the most human experience you can have, the experience you were created for, the experience of joy. Friends, this is why we start with pride in this series, not just because it's first on the list. It's not just the first of the deadly sins, it's the root of the deadly sins. Pride puts self on the throne of your life, and self on the throne says, I need to be secure at all costs. That's greed. I have a right to pleasure on my own terms. That's lust. No one gets to wrong me without consequences. That's wrath. Why do they get what I want? Envy. Self on the throne says, I deserve a break from all this. That's sloth. And every appetite I have must and should be fed. That's gluttony. John Johnson said to me this week, pride is the mother hen under which all other sins hatch. That's why we're talking about it first. Go to the bottom of every single sin, and here's what you'll find. A throne and a self that has decided it should be sitting on that throne. But let me back up and ask, why? Why is this wrong? Why is it wrong for me to be on the throne of my life? It's my life. I should call the shots. I should rule the roost, right? Isn't this what culture tells us time and again? Why is this so bad? Here's what Tim Keller says. He says, pride is that which claims to be the author of what is really a gift. Pride is a form of cosmic plagiarism. Something else has been brought into your life. Something has been given to you, and you say, I wrote it. I composed it. I did it. You claim to be the author of that which is a sheer gift. Let me break it down for you and make it a little more clear. You didn't choose your race. You didn't choose your family. You didn't choose your century, your country, the native language you think in, or even the brain that you think with. But I worked hard, Pastor Dave. Yes. With what? With all these things that you were given. The Christian worldview sees our lives as gifts. Yes, gifts to steward well. But all that we have, friends, has been given to us by the good Lord Almighty. And pride looks at a life and says, I've done a lot. Humility looks at a life and says, I've been given a lot. A number of years ago, when I was going through a really difficult time in my life, a good friend handed me this little book called Humility by Andrew Murray. I brought it up here today because I wanted you to see just how small it is. These are the best books to read, by the way. This tiny little book, 106 pages, rocked my life. Specifically, it showed me how much hidden pride I have and how essential humility is to the soul of a human being. I cannot recommend this book enough. And even though I'll say it's a harder read, I strongly encourage the old unabridged version in the old King James English. It'll force you to slow down and read it real carefully. Here's a link or a page to order it from Powell's. #WeShopLocal. Which is probably the one thing you'll take away from the sermon today. I don't really remember what Pastor Dave said, but I do remember he endorsed Powell's. That'll be my wife's favorite part. She loves books. Anyway, here's what Murray has to say. He says this. He says a lot, but here's one thing he says. There is nothing so natural to man, to humanity, nothing so insidious and hidden from our sight, nothing so difficult and dangerous as pride. He's right. Pride hides. It hides in self-sufficiency. I've got it handled. It hides in self-improvement. I'm doing transformation as a personal project that doesn't involve God. It hides in self-protection. I don't need to be that vulnerable with people. It's not smart to expose myself. It hides in self-righteousness. I compare to feel good, to feel superior. I'll also say that increasingly in our world, I think pride hides in our deconstruction. Because skepticism, we live in the age of skepticism. Skepticism is not always bad. It can be good, but in a culture leery of authority and institutions, the idea that I alone can figure out truth, that I only need me to figure out what's ultimately real and true. Friends, that is often just one more way of putting self on the throne of your life. But let's go back to Daniel chapter 4 and King Nebuchadnezzar. At the end of that time, at the end of his time living like a pride-filled animal in a field, at the end of that time, I, Nebuchadnezzar, raised my eyes toward heaven, and my sanity was restored. 5 words that led to the restoration of this man. Raised my eyes toward heaven. You see, after years of looking at himself, after years of looking at his buildings and his power and his majesty and his accomplishments, Nebuchadnezzar finally looked up. And when he did, the text says, my sanity was restored. Then I praised the Most High. I honored and glorified him who lives forever. Friends, that is a picture of a man who just stepped off the throne. That's what it looks like. That's what it sounds like when pride finally releases its grip on a human soul. And before we move on, I want to share with you one more story. This is a Jesus story. It's one he tells in Luke chapter 18. It's one you may have heard of. It's about 2 men who go to the temple to pray. And the first one, he's very religious. He's righteous. Externally, through and through. He's got all the right words. He's got all the right behaviors. And he says this, God, I thank you that I am not like other people. Robbers, evildoers, adulterers. You can see the bar is real high. Or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week and give 1/10 of all I get. Now here's here's the hard, honest truth about this guy. He's probably not lying. He probably does fast twice a week. He probably does tithe. But the focus of his prayer, the focus of his righteousness is him. He's the focus of his righteousness. But the second man, we're told, the tax collector, stood at a distance. He would not even look up to heaven, but beat his breast and said, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. You see, one guy looks to God, and the other guy says, look what I've done, God. And Jesus says this, he says, the tax collector went home justified. The Pharisee did not. The tax collector is on the road to life in abundance. The Pharisee is not. Now, I tell this story because there are Nebuchadnezzars in our world. There are powerful people who overtly proclaim their own greatness in our nation, and they should heed Nebuchadnezzar's warning. But most of us in here aren't Nebuchadnezzar. I don't imagine you've spent time recently standing on the roof of your palace declaring your own majesty. Maybe you have. Let's talk later. Most of us in here aren't Nebuchadnezzar, but we do sometimes say to God, and more likely to ourselves in the quietness of our own minds, look what I've done. Look who I've become. Man, I am certainly better than those people, whoever those people are for you. I was listening to a social commentator this week talk about the power of identity and moral superiority. This person was talking about how one of the main reasons people in our culture today choose to get into and identify with groups, political groups, neighborhood groups, racial groups, socioeconomic groups, or even religious groups, they do that to feel superior to others. We join a group to say, look at us, we're smarter, we're better, and we are morally above them. I identify here so that I can feel better than you. This sometimes even happens in church. Friends, this is nothing more than pride. Pride loves comparison. Pride feeds on self-exaltation over and above others, which is why the thing that kills pride is God exaltation and others exaltation. Do you think it's an accident? I don't. That the highest, most important, number one command according to Jesus is love God and love others? Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment, and the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. Friends, sometimes we read this command as this very spiritual, maybe ethereal sort of idea, but let me just tell you, it is oh so very practical. Because this will kill pride in your life. This will safeguard your soul against the corrosion and corruption of making self the center of your life. You see, it's hard to be all about you when you're all about him. It's hard to lift up yourself when you are constantly looking to the interests of others. So how do we do it? How do we walk in humility? What does it look like when pride releases its grip on us? Here's the first thing I want to say. Humility is not something you can work at. This is important because I know some of you in here already started. You already started thinking, this is the week. I'm going to buckle down. Got to be more humble this week. I got a checklist of things to do to work on my humility. And can I just say, you will fail. You cannot wake up on Monday and decide, today I'm going to be more humble, because if you somehow pull it off, you'll probably be pretty proud of yourself by lunchtime. That's the trap. C.S. Lewis says it better than anyone. Ready? Here it is. The best definition of humility ever. Humility is not thinking less of yourself. It is thinking of yourself less. You see, true humility is not self-deprecation. It's not low self-esteem. It's actually just another form of pride. When you talk and think low of you, you are still all about who? You. True humility is self-forgetfulness. You're not thinking about yourself so much because you're too busy thinking of another. And isn't that what Nebuchadnezzar's recovery looks like? Isn't that what we see in him? He doesn't say, man, I'm so tired of eating grass in this field. I'm going to try harder to be humble. No, he just raises his eyes toward heaven. He looks up. He looks out. And the self that consumed him begins to recede. Friends, let me tell you this. The gospel, the good news of Jesus Christ, fuels humility in our lives. Why? How? Because here's the question in our world, and maybe it's a question you've already asked, because this is sort of the pushback on this message. If I don't think about myself, if I don't look out for number one, then who is going to? Who's going to look out for me if not me? If I don't look out for me, aren't people going to forget about me? Aren't people going to take advantage of me? Don't I have to look out for me? And what does Jesus say? Look at the birds of the air. Look at the flowers of the field. God takes care even of them. And how much more valuable to him are you? In fact, you are so valuable. You are so prized and treasured and cherished that Jesus gave his life for you. You see, the gospel says you don't have to look out for you because God's looking out for you. The maker of heaven and earth is looking out for you. The King of kings and the Lord of lords has got your back. You don't need to think about you because he's thinking about you. This is exactly what Paul is getting at in Philippians chapter 2 when he says, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus. He's not saying, see, sometimes we read this passage and we think he's saying, see how humble Jesus was? Now you go out there, church, and try harder to be humble like Jesus was. No. He's saying, see how full Jesus was of God's love? So full that he was free to forget himself entirely. That he was free to come down from heaven, down to a manger, down to a cross, not because he was weak, but because he was free. Free in the love of the Father. Free from all the trappings and limitations of pride. It did not live in him. William Law is credited to say this, 2 quotes. These are so good. Just let them sit. Pride must die in you, or nothing of heaven can live in you. Evil can have no beginning but from pride, and no end but from humility. So here's where I want to land. Nebuchadnezzar had a 12-month window between his dream and his fall. 12 months to get self off of the throne of his life, but he didn't take it. My prayer today is that we will take it. That we will walk that path and step in that direction. And so the question I want to leave with us this morning is this. Where is self quietly on the throne of your life? Not because you're arrogant. Not because you're pompous or because you're cocky, just because you want to be in control of you. Just because you've gotten used to looking out for you. Just because you are used to making you the priority. Just because this is what you've been taught to do and how you've been taught to live. Where is self quietly on the throne of your life? Maybe it's your dating life. You're not giving control of that up. You're not laying that down. You are running that show. You will do it the way you want. Maybe it's your marriage. The way decisions get made, the dynamic you have. Maybe you're holding on real tight. Resisting God's change. Maybe it's your prayer life or the absence of one that says, I'm the king of me. Maybe it's the way you've been working on yourself without ever bringing God into the room or into the space, just improvement, and you call it healthy. Maybe it's just a way of being in control. Maybe it's the way you'd rather white knuckle a hard season alone than let anyone see that you're struggling. Or maybe it's even the way you come to church. You come in already knowing everything that you think and really unwilling to change. No pastor, no church is going to tell me what to think. I'm on the throne. So here's the deal. In just a minute, we're going to sing, and I want you to hear this. In a culture built on self-exaltation, and by the way, I think we can all agree that our culture is built on self-exaltation. It has never been more obvious than it is now. Don't let the team distract you. This is good. In a culture built, that's a prideful statement, isn't it? I wrote it and it's quite intelligent. No. I got most of this material from others. In a culture built on self-exaltation, worship might be the most countercultural act a human being can perform. You see, when we stand and we sing, "Great are you, Lord. Great are you, Lord," we are making a declaration that contradicts every "I will" on the staircase. We are actually doing with our voices what Nebuchadnezzar did when he raised his eyes towards heaven. We are declaring together to our wandering hearts, our focus is not on us, it's on you, God. We don't want to be on the throne, we want you on the throne. We don't have to look out for ourselves because you are looking out for us. We are saying together, it's your breath in our lungs, Lord. It's not our breath, it's not our power, it's your power. Every inhale, every breath out is a gift from you. And friends, you see, when we sing those words together and we exalt the Lord together in this place, pride dies a little in our midst and humility grows a little in our midst. That pride would die and that humility would grow, that Jesus would be lifted up here in our hearts and in our church. Amen? Let's stand and let's sing together. Doesn't that feel good? Just like that intentional move of just saying, Lord, you on the throne. I don't want to be on that throne. I want you on that throne. And my wife will tell me sometimes, when you get up at the end, don't preach another sermon. We just heard you. Let people go home and eat lunch. I'm not going to preach again, but I have to show you this one thing because God literally revealed it to me this morning in the front row. This is the author of Hebrews. And just think about our sermon today. He says, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin, the pride that so easily entangles. And let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. How? Fixing our eyes on Jesus, not on self, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. For the joy set before him, why can we trust him to look out for us? Because for the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of God. He did that for you. That's how much he cares for you. So go today with Christ on the throne. Not yourself, not your problems, not your successes, not letting those things define you, but him define you. Cindy talked about shining today, shining as lights in this world. We shine when God is on the throne of our lives. Amen? God bless you, church. We'll see you next Sunday. Have a great day.